This is the Unscripted Podcast.
We're sorry y'all couldn't see our new scene that Ben was supposed to create.
Yeah, well, he created it, but he just wanted to hold on to it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
He said he's got it.
He's too busy dating a girl to upload the thing on the podcast.
Maybe we should get Ben on here and talk about dating techniques or something. You know, what do you think about that?
Listen now, he's
Need a little bit more experience.
he said he needs a little more experience.
No, he's locked down. He's locked down a good one right now.
Yeah. The choosing mates is a big
She
thing.
felt
man.
sorry for him. I don't think he's had a date in at least 8 months.
Well, it's kind of like our dog. You know, we got a dog now. You seen our little dog?
Yeah, I saw your little dog.
I was welding a boat for
Ben, we're just messing with you.
for one of our shepherds. He had poked a hole in the boat, and so we actually had to flip it over with the tractor. You had to ratchet strap it and flip it over and weld the boat up because it was where it was at. You couldn't get to it to weld it.
For our listeners that don't know what a ratchet strap is, will you tell them what that is?
You know, like you dog down something on your truck, you know, and the little dog showed up over at
if
the
you're
house.
still listening to this podcast and you don't know what a ratchet strap is by now, man, well, welcome to the
We
Unscripted
probably have
Podcast.
ratchet strap in our demographic, you know, and but the little dog showed up, and she's a cute little dog, so we just been feeding her, you know, but she stays outside.
Yeah.
You know, we don't let her in the house. It's fine if you love your dogs and you want your dogs to be in the house, Don. But we don't love our dogs enough to let them in the house, and so our dog is just going to stay outside. The boys go out there and play with her, and you know they're learning hard lessons now. Like last night, Bo, you know, you hear him screaming. You're like, "What's the matter?" You go out there, and the dog chewed the head off one of his dinosaur toys he got for Christmas that he left in the yard.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Can't leave it in the yard anymore.
Yep.
I told Bo, I said, I was pulling in last Wednesday for the shop class, and the little dog, your new little dog, was coming out there to greet us at the road. You know, we couldn't get in the driveway because we didn't want to run over a little Scruffy, or what'd y'all name it?
Ginger.
I didn't want to run over Ginger, so I rolled down the window and said, Bo, call your dog. Bo, call your dog. He's like, come here, dog. And he's running out there, and he was probably calling the name or whatever, and the dog wasn't listening to Bo, you know. I said, Bo, you need to start feeding it by hand, you know, hand feed it, and that dog will follow you everywhere you go.
Say that again.
I said, you need to hand feed it.
So, okay, I know we're talking podcast, but can you come over and give us a few pointers on this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like tomorrow morning when you come for class, can you spend some time with Aiden with Liam and Bo?
Yeah. So the idea is that if you want to be lazy with your dog won't listen to you. But if you hand feed, if every piece, so with our dog, every bite of food that he got the first 6 months of his life came from one of our hands.
Oh wow.
And so,
that makes sense when you say hand feed. I didn't know what you meant.
yeah. So like
Hand feed.
if he wants to bite, he's gonna have to work on it. Well, so you know, sit. Well, finally, naturally, that dog will sit, and then he gets rewarded. He's like, okay. So then,
Well, I've always heard you ain't supposed to feed like them people that have them real fancy like rescue dogs and stuff like that. Are we good over there? Y'all sure are. You know, we good? Yeah, we're good. Okay.
we got a new production team. Got a new production member today.
Right.
Don's just learning the ropes.
Don, the man's joining us.
Ben's just trying to pawn it off. He's over here smitten, is what it is. He can't think straight. You
But
know?
like, you talking about like cadaver dogs or something?
Yeah, cadaver dogs. Like we had a guy back home that was like literally there was only 3 of these dogs in the world. They were rubble dogs. And what that meant was like when he would go to, he was a deacon. This dates it, and I don't remember when this was. There was this huge earthquake in Iran. He worked for FEMA. He had a contract with FEMA or whatever. And when the dog, when they would like building falls down, right? And so they
Searching for dead bodies or survivors.
Yeah, but it would only think. It was only taught to think when it was on a rubble pile.
Yeah.
So if it was like in the yard, sit, right? Whatever the command was. He taught it in German, I believe. And so whatever the command for the dog was, that's what he taught the dog, you know, to tell the dog, but it could think when it was on the rubble pile by itself. And so he told me, because he used like this little, it looked like a little sewed up sock is all it was. You know, like he had just, you know, when the dog would do a good, he would give him that sock as a reward instead of food.
Yeah.
And he said you weren't supposed to give him food. Why would he say that and you say something different?
So for some dogs, it's different. But they you can trace this goes back to the biblical thing. You know, they didn't take a Great Pyrenees, and they didn't take a Chihuahua, and they didn't take a bulldog on the ark.
Why didn't they for?
And so, you know, God created.
Don's over here thinking, why didn't they take the bulldog?
They created the cane. God created the canine,
right?
And so when you take two of every kind,
right?
You know you can get many different species from the one original.
Well, yeah, I mean y'all got a German Shepherd?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I read an article a while back, and it was talking about the dogs all these frou-frou dogs we have nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, these, Pekin Poodlese or whatever it is, and
Labradoodles,
and
Retrievadoodles,
yeah, well,
Retrievadors.
Yeah, you pay all this money for them, and then if they go to
me and Chris don't.
If mine's a show up dog, okay. Right. If they go to the pound, then they're just a mutt to the pound because it's like it's not a golden retriever or a poodle. You know, they haven't lived long enough or had their lineage established long enough to actually be AKC standard or whatever. But so you're saying that we need to feed.
So different dogs they have different drives, and so for a bomb and arson dog, for a bomb dog, they train them only on food. Their reward is a food. Their reward is not a ball. So my drug dog, when I had him in the sheriff's office, he had such a and oftentimes dogs are trained on their kill prey instinct. Like squirrels out in the yard, I'm gonna go try to kill it. Dog chases it, but can't catch it. Same way that a dog chases after a ball. It's their kill prey instinct. I chase something that moves and I grab it with my mouth, and so that's their kill prey instinct. And so to train a dope dog, you put him in the odor of a certain narcotic, and then if his instinct has been that I'm going to react to that, and so if they're an aggressive alert dog, they're trying to dig for that odor, but they know that their ball has been introduced, and so you get them in that odor, they're already smelling it. Then all of a sudden, oh, my tennis ball just showed up.
Okay.
And so they're
that's the reset.
It's the reset for them. And then, but for passive dogs that would be like Bob and Chris, they get in the odor and they sit down, and then they understand when I sit down, my ball shows up.
So that's how come I watch him on Cops sometimes. I like the old Cops episodes. Like there's this app called Pluto or something like that. And they have just a Cops channel. And so when they show up and they got like a 92 Caprice, I'm like, this is going to be a good one. This is when they still thump people on the head, And so they show up and like sometimes a dog, they'll bring him out to like look in the car or whatever, and then he'll sit down. Yeah. And sometimes he'll bark and kind of.
And so they'll scratch. So my dog, he would scratch. He was trying to get after it. And so then when he got old, he was like 13 when we retired him. He would show up and he's like, he just hit it with his paw. He's like,
he's old man.
I know this thing's supposed to do. And then he would chase his toy.
So he's turned into the old guy that's just like, hey, I'm backing out, hit reverse, and y'all need to watch out for me.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just coming out of my driveway.
Like, it's in there.
Yeah.
And so
I'm gonna lay down till y'all feed me.
But that's so it just depends on the different dog type. But here's the thing: every dog has to eat, and so if he doesn't have a good food drive today, don't feed him. And,
say that again. What do you mean?
Okay, so if he's paying attention to you, like if you just gave him a whole bowl of food, same way with you and me. If we just get done with your wife ever tell you, you're sitting there eating Chinese and it's like, what do you want for supper? It's like,
yeah,
I'm stuffed right now.
I don't think about food.
I don't think about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want the dog to be really paying attention to food, feed him this morning, but then when you want to start working with him, don't feed him tonight. Start working with him with a hand feeding tomorrow morning. And he's like, all right, you got the food? I'm all ears.
Yeah, because I don't want her to train us.
Exactly.
So it's like with our kids, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And so I told Bo, I said, so if every time you whistle for that dog, if you give it a treat, so the best thing to get is a little Lowe's nail bag.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then you just tie it around. You keep doggy food in it that would be his normal dog food. And so if the dog's going to get a cup of food a day, you put that cup of food inside the bag. And so then they get like 18 snacks throughout the day instead of
one bowl
food. So they're like, oh, you're going to give me the bowl? I ain't going to work for it.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like every time Bo goes, come here, Ginger. And if he's consistent, then Ginger comes because Ginger knows, oh, I just got I heard that whistle and then I got this food. So then, whenever when Ginger's out by the road or there's some kind of scare thing and you really whistle for your dog, then they'll come for you or whatever. And so
this is good information.
Yeah.
That you're telling me here.
But it's the same way with us. Like you think about our Father in heaven that, you hear the saying, don't break the hand that feeds you.
Right.
And so we understand that our Father as a shepherd, he leads me beside the still waters. He makes me lie down in green pastures, and there's so the way that he leads me, and so the sheep understands the trust side of it, and so the dog will understand the trust side of it. And so the more that you live as a Christian, the more that you realize the blessings of God, the blessings of being around his people, the blessings of being in the church, the blessings of having great mentors in the church that are there, the blessings of whenever I put God's word in my life every day on a consistent basis, okay, these things are paying off in my spiritual life. And so I understand that now God's leading me. And so, okay, I do want to feast on him. I do want to feed on him. And
well, that's part of the, and I was thinking about, like, I don't want the dog to train us either, because like in the morning, I don't know, it's about between 6:30 and 7, you kind of hear the dog like stand at the door, coming in from the garage, and she'll scratch like, hey, y'all need to feed me. Mm-hmm. But we don't want the dog to think that she can train us, because that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And that'll happen with us with the world. Mm-hmm. The world will train us. The world will get us to think these things. Like let me tell you how good of an evangelist I used to be, Bob. I used to be such a good evangelist that literally I could judge whether somebody would obey the gospel or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so good at that.
That was before you. That was before you had studies with plenty of people. Then, right?
Yeah, right. I could look and be like, he'll never obey the gospel.
Yeah, right.
But what happened is the world trained me to think that way, and so we got to get out of that.
That's what happened to me, and I met Bach. Right. I was like, "There's no way this is gonna, happen or whatever." And then, we're sitting up there Sunday night, singing with our with the kids, on the singing emphasis night, and little Ash gets up there to sing Amazing Grace, and man, I was just biting back the tears, just because I see their family, and while they'll tell you, over and over again, we still have our challenges, but it's like they've been coming around since 2017, and Ash is literally consistently he's growing up in the church, because people decided that they would obey God's word and strive to make big changes in their life as they go along and as they learned. And, Bach never smiles at me when I'm singing, but Ash is up there and Bach is, I've never seen him sing Amazing Grace like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And, but, it was, I don't know, the ways of the Lord and his providence and just seeing how he's working in people's lives. And
well, he's still teaching us too.
All the time.
I mean, that's a blessing, is that, I don't know if you ever pray this prayer, and I'm sure you pray one like it, but, something happens and you stop and you think like, I know you said that, like in the Bible, in the way, in the word, some kind of way. I know you said that, but thanks for teaching me. Mm-hmm. Thanks for teaching me about it. And
you talking about to the Lord or to somebody?
To the Lord,
yeah,
right. Like you teach these things like, they'll know you by your love, mm-hmm. right? We just had a recent kind of thing that happened because of the way that our church loved on a family, mm-hmm. And this person on the outside is now coming to the inside because of the way that our church family loved on this family. And you think about that draw, and you teach these lessons. Jesus says these things and all this stuff, and you realize like you teach them, but you don't quite understand them sometimes. And so when somebody steps up and says, "I just want to be part of this because of the way that you guys loved on this family," that's pretty powerful. And that's pretty special. And And I know I've probably taught that lesson before, but then you have to stop and say, just thank you, Lord, for just keeping on teaching me, seeing me stupid and worthy enough to still be taught. And so make my heart soft so that I'll always be taught and I can still learn these lessons like this.
Yeah, it's that was one of the things yesterday. You know, yesterday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and it's special that Don's in here with us, and but I think about, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. and the things that he's tried to do to break down, you know, racism and segregation and things in the world. And so yesterday, you know, we have our Manic Mondays and things, and so Manic Mondays is something we do with our youth. It's I don't ever tell them what we're doing. That we may be doing a service project, or we may be going, you know, playing laser tag or whatever. And so yesterday, our Manic Monday, didn't tell them what we're doing, but we went and got food, and then we were going to go bowling. But I tried to be real pointed with how we did our devotional. I don't know if your boys talked to you about that or anything yesterday or not, but
we talked about it in Bible time last night.
Yeah, and so this you know, I met this guy out in the community a few years ago, just selling okra. And as we pulled up to buy the okra from his place, I saw this historical plaque. And I like going and reading those things when I have time. And so I went and looked at it, and it's the plaque of Vernon F. Dahmer Sr. And he was a businessman and a farmer from 1908 to 1966. And so he was a man that really stood up for voting rights of all people. But he tried to, during the segregation movements and things, he tried to do things to break down barriers, and he was a leader of the NAACP in the chapter down here. But he was there was even things that he tried to do with pulling in white people to work at the polls as well, because he wanted to break down barriers on a lot of ways. And so he caught a lot of flack from NAACP people.
Like bringing white people into the
the
black area?
Yeah, that's right. And so he caught flack by those things too. And this guy was a mixed race, and he could have actually passed in some ways. If he wanted to check white, he could have, because he had that kind of thing in his family. He was biracial, and so, but he chose not to do that. And anyways, long story short, he I think it was in the 50s that he chose to he was going to re-up here in Forest County and try to get do his voting rights again or whatever. I don't know. I can't remember what it was anyways, but he was trying to reschedule. Well, there was a guy that said, yeah, you can resubmit your forms if you can tell me how many bubbles are in a bar of soap. And like and so I was sharing that with the kids yesterday, that like while today for MLK on a Monday for you kids is, I get to sleep in, we can go do stuff with our friends. Like, there was real racial prejudice things that really went on. And you, every time that you have the opportunity to assemble with the church, and every time that you have the opportunity to go out in outings where we are white, black, Hispanic, Asian working together, I said, you're breaking down barriers. But a lot of times youth, you know, we're real good at nipping at each other a lot, you know, and one-upping each other and cutting each other down. And and so
stupid kids.
we do it too. But the point was that we were just reading things from 1 John, and how that you're going to be known by your love. And how can you say that you love God and you hate your brother and who you've seen, and say that you love God who you've not seen?
Right.
And so we just had a good moment out there. Well, this guy eventually, like him and some others were on a lawsuit against this guy who was showing so much prejudice in that. Well, he even testified in court, and it wasn't long later that some knights from the Ku Klux Klan came, and they were much of them making threats, but they firebombed his house and were shooting guns in his house. And so he protected his family and allowed them to get out of the house, but he was severely burned and was burned in his lungs, and went to the hospital. And eventually, he succumbed to the problems. But he wasn't allowed to vote for 12 years because of racial things that were going on. But anyways, he worked so hard for this. But he was just a staple in our own community of somebody who was standing up for the rights of other people, and was somebody who was trying to break down barriers, in the 50s and 60s, 70 years ago,
Yeah, and you think about, you said this thing with First John that how can you love your brother, hate your brother who you've seen, and then say I love Jesus who I haven't, right? Well, it's the way that God kind of gives us these. So you think about this scenario, that what God does is he could have just written a rule book.
Yeah.
He could have just gave us a book.
Could have raised up robots.
He could have gave us the book and said, don't do these things, and then walked away. But he doesn't, right? He gives us this book that's got explicit rules in it. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. There's just explicit things that I can and can't do.
Yeah.
And because of that, God gives us this blessed thing of these people that surround the rules, so that we can then look backwards and we can see how these people, what God meant when he said these things, right? Yeah. So when God said, don't commit adultery, it was never about where you take your britches off at.
Right.
Well, that's part of it, right?
He want to change their hearts.
Yeah, he wants you to understand that man, the marriage is a special place, and you got to raise your boys and your girls, and they need to know that mom and daddy are always going to be there, that daddy loves mama only, mama loves daddy only. And so what God does then is he gives us these rules, right? He gives us these, whatever you want to call it, commandments, however you want to say it, whether it's Old Testament, New Testament, right, patriarchal period, whatever, time, dispensation you want to hold on to. And then he gives us these people that kind of surround these events. And so then we get to see what happens when they do successfully complete what the Lord tells them to do, not as an obligation, just like you were talking about Noah bringing the dogs on the ark. Our dogs, we're trying to figure out a way to program our dogs to come, right? But they'll never understand the philosophy of why it's important for them to be obedient to us. They're just going to learn what you're telling me, and you're right. You're using their instinctive nature that they need to eat. They need to secure a food source, so you're using their instinctive nature that God programmed them with, then to make them viable to understand how to form habits, right? Well, that's not what God wants us to do. God doesn't want to use our instinctive nature to help us form habits. He wants us to understand that there are things about our nature that are detriments to us, but they're also, in the same stroke of the pen, they're a blessing to us. So your desires to want to have children, your sexual desire, that's a perfectly normal and blessed thing to have, but God gave us the perfect place to do it at.
He gave us a standard, right?
He gave us a standard, and then we got to see what happens
with with one man and one woman in their marriage.
That's exactly
classify
right.
that.
That's exactly right. And so you think about those things in your life, and so God, what he does is he gives us all these characters, so we get to see when people are successful in their marriages. Boaz and what's her name?
Naomi or Ruth?
Ruth, huh? No, I said it right. I said it right at first. I was thinking Rahab in my head. But, you go from Rahab, who is who's always named the harlot, right? This prostitute that comes out, and then she is the grandmother of Boaz, that Boaz takes on this Ruth as this character, Naomi scenario here, and they have one of the most pictured.
I think she was Boaz's mama.
Well, I thought she was his grandma, but either way, the fact of the matter is that you get one of the best pictures of a marriage from this scene, and what you see is these two people, when they become one, there's just this awesome love scene that we hold up forever, and as far as historical value and us being able to look back at what a successful marriage looks like.
Yeah,
and
Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Salmon
begot Boaz by Rahab. So Rahab was Boaz's mama.
Okay, his mama.
Yeah, that's Matthew 1:5.
All right. Well, either way.
Yeah. So and that's what's the cool thing is I got to say this before we go any further is like that's what God wants with His people is He wants love to be a pattern that He's led us by to where it breaks down those barriers residually, and so you have one generation later. In the story of Rahab and Boaz with Ruth, Boaz he's the one who's Ruth is gleaning in his field.
Yeah, and
that was a God's law.
But you think about not only that, Bob, but think about how maybe I shouldn't say perfect, but so let's just take a step back. Rahab, Gentile, right, comes into the fold of Israel with Salmon, right, converts to Judaism, obviously, right. She comes into the fold of Judaism, then they learn the law so explicitly that when Ruth is discovered as an available, what do you want to say, potentially available mate, that Boaz says, who is the next of kin?
Right. He's
asking this question because there was a pecking order God had preserved for a very special reason, so that the lineage would be right, so that the what do you call it, when you give your stuff away, inheritance, all that stuff would be right. All that stuff was written in there. And so Boaz, he asked this question, like, who's the one that will redeem her? Who's the near kin? That was learned from his mama, who was a Gentile.
Yeah.
Right? That her faith starts with fear. You know, when Israel shows up, she says, our hearts melted. We heard of the terror that you performed in Egypt.
We heard what your God did.
Yeah, it starts with faith. I mean, her faith starts with fear, and then it develops into the foundation.
And the woman who had never seen the Red Sea part or what God
40
did.
years, Bob.
She did.
This is 40 years later when they're entering Jericho.
She had more faith than the people who actually saw it.
That's right.
She had more belief in God, and it came out in her statements. And so, as you said, this was for Ruth, God's law was if you own a field, don't combine your corners. Yeah. Don't pick your corners.
Leave the corners.
Leave the corners for the poor. And if you drop a piece of grain on the ground, it's going to leave it. Don't pick it up. Don't put it in the bag because that's going to be for the gleaners. That's for the poor.
And just think about what God did with that, right? I mean, instinctively, our nature is give me. Right?
Give me.
Give me. You know, like
that's my field. Get out. Put up a no trespassing sign.
And on the other side of the coin, if I want something and like let's just say that for whatever reason my crops didn't grow this year and I just had a bad year or whatever. Well, instinctively I want you to just give it to me. That's our instinct, right? Because there's no, you can't do that. There's going to be a twofold to this. Like you're going to leave the corners of your fields. And then the poor people, they're going to still have to come and work for it. So your instinct of wanting to garner it all, you're going to work against that. And then you that wants to just put it in a sack and I'll come by and pick it up. Like I've had people call me before wanting benevolence help and say, you mind if I come by and look, see what you got? I say, absolutely I do. I certainly mind that because you'll get what we give you. And I ain't trying to be mean about it. But I'll tell Jessica, like back home when we used to buy the church supplied, like they would have like a month. Like Jessica kept up with it. It'd be like you'd pick a leaf off a tree this month and you'd go get beans or you go get corn or whatever to put in our food pantry. Well, Jessica and I, we just agreed like if we buy Walmart beans, they get Walmart beans. So they're going to eat just like we are. And so that way when they call and say, you mind if I come by and look and see what you got? No, you can't do that.
Yeah, when we do disaster relief, you can always tell because, we have a truck that comes in with $86,000 worth of stuff, and that's a blessing to be in the Church of Christ. And listen, folks, when there's nobody who has deeper pockets than the Lord. Amen. You got a disaster that comes through, you got a disaster relief truck that'll come in with $86,000 roughly.
I bet it's more now when eggs are $5 for 3.
A tractor trailer load, and so you what are you going to do with that money? But we're out, whenever I go in these disaster zones, we try to teach these churches like God has given you $86,000 worth of stuff.
He's pouring it on you right now.
He's pouring it on you right now.
A truckload of blessings.
And another truckload can come in later. How are you going to use this to teach the gospel to people? And so that's one thing that we're trying to do. It's like, all right, we've made 11 disaster relief trips in the last 3 years. and we're trying to do these things with churches, and it's more than just our personal evangelism, but like trying to get them to be evangelistically minded about this.
Well, it fights against our nature.
Exactly.
And so it goes back to this thing that God gives us these, historical, like you're talking about this historical figure that while it was a great blessing, what this person did for not just black people, but everybody, because, we all learned those lessons that way.
Yeah.
Right. But God gives us this book with all these rules in it that when we look at it that way, that there's this book full of rules.
It's just a book of rules.
And what happens is I try to figure out ways to not do it. Like let me tell you a perfect example. I walked out of the clinic last night. I went to the clinic, and it was about dark. And when I got there, I was walking up, and the security guard, he reminded me of the guy. Do you remember the Andy Griffith episode where the bank robbers come in and the security guard is asleep?
Yes.
So this old guy was sitting up there, and I when I was walking up, I talked to him. I was like, "Hey man, how you doing?" He didn't say a word. I was like, "You doing all right?" Nothing. When I got up to him, I waved, and he waved at me. So he's deaf as a coot, I assumed. He just couldn't hear nothing.
A coot.
So I'll go inside, I do my deed, right, and I come back out, and he's sitting at the front, and he's reading a novel type book.
Security guard.
Yeah, it's a big thick book. And
where are you at again?
At the place in Petal where Shannon works at.
Yeah. I know that guy too.
You know what I'm talking about? He's an old guy.
Yeah.
And so I walk out the door, and he's reading a novel, at the front door, which is fine.
Yeah.
So I was like, "What you reading?" And he said, "I'm reading where all these preachers are wrong." And I was like, "Okay, what do you mean?" And he closes the cover. Well, somebody had bought him the Message Bible.
Oh.
And I thought, well, maybe he's discovered some truth in here.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be an excellent way that I can segue into a conversation with
y'all.
him.
That's a watered down translation, just so you know.
And,
the Message.
Well, and I'm going to get into it.
Go ahead.
And because he says, I read right here where it says, a man can have as many wives as he wants, but the sin is when I go back to the first one. That's an abomination. I said, where's that at? He said, I don't remember where I read it at. It's just in there. I just saw it. He said, I've heard about all these preachers all their lives preach against divorce, and I read it right here. And so I said, let me just show you. Can I just show you some things in here? So I picked it up, and I thumbed through it, and I haven't never, in my board, when you say watered down, I'm telling you, Bob, it is watered down.
I can take a lot of translations and lead a lot of people to Jesus the right way.
But this one, man, and so I showed him some real. I was going to show him some.
That one's dangerous.
That I thought, well, this will be explicit here.
No,
nothing. And so, and I told him, I said, he said, well, how do we know our translations are right? And I got sawdust all over me. I'm nasty, and so I was like, well, if you got a minute, I'd like to explain that to you. And he said, go ahead. I want to hear this. So I talked to him about how we got our translations and everything. And he said, well, how do you know that we got the right ones? So we went through and we worked through some of those things, and we had a good conversation with it. And I told him, I said, listen, the challenge with this is the challenge with what you're reading is this. I said, can I give you some advice? And he said, sure. I said, this is going to tell you what you want to hear. I said, the Bible is going to tell you what you need to hear. I said, so what you have here is not a Bible. It's just a book now. But if you go in there and get the Bible, because they have a Bible in it, because I was reading it. And I was sitting there in the waiting room reading the Romans 2, 3, and 4 last night is what I read in the waiting room. Mm-hmm. And so I know they got a Bible in there, and I said, that's a Bible. This is a book. Ain't nothing wrong with reading books, but this is going to tell you what you want to hear. That one will tell you what you need to hear. And I wasn't mean or anything like that, but he needed to know. Like he and I said so, because when he said the thing about marriage and divorce or whatever, and I said, I don't know your situation. I said, but you're staking eternity on that one thing. I said, when all the rest of them say something different.
Yeah, and the Message is one guy's belief about how this thing should be translated. There's no translation team that he gleans things from other people, or they go, no, you You ain't got that right.
Yeah, that's
because of this, and this.
Oh man, I mean, it's soft on the homosexual stuff. It's soft on marriage and divorce. I mean, it's basically strong on nothing, but nothing.
Yeah.
And so somebody gave it to him. He said, and so he's been reading it. Now I'm sure that you probably read through some of the Conquest of Canaan and stuff like that, and it's still probably good reads.
Yeah.
Just for the dude stuff. The action and adventure. But I told him, and that's what I said. This is just a book.
Yeah, and so when we read the Bible as a rule book versus the greatest love story ever, it'll change the way that you view Christianity. If we truly would view Christianity as okay, doing marriage counseling with a couple last night, premarital counseling, and it's like, okay, why is sin our biggest problem? And we listed out here's reasons why. Reason number one, it separates you from God, and so you can be separated eternally. So you've got to be in a relationship with Christ to have His blood covering your sins, so that you're in right standing with God. Because otherwise, you're separated. The second thing is it's going to harden your heart, and so we can get so adjusted to sin to the point that I can do things over and over and over again to where I'll justify those things and where they'll become second nature.
That's it.
The programs
the
I
nature.
view. Exactly.
Yeah, the nature of it. I mean, you think about, from this standpoint of like, if we just see the Bible as just this book of rules, if God just wanted us to see it that way, then He would have given it to us that. And then we could take comfort in the fact of how well we're keeping the rules.
Right. That's Peter said we're leaving that.
Yeah, exactly.
In Acts 2, we're leaving Judaism.
Absolutely. And you think about the process. I mean, like, think about Don over here, right? Like, I baptized Don, right? I did Don's wedding. I was at the hospital when little D was born, right?
Yeah.
So think about all the process that Don has had to go through in his life. That's no different than everybody else, So what Don has on his plate now is he's a new daddy. So he's got to look around. How old is D? 10 months.
10 months old.
Yeah. So he's staring down the pipe at a 1-year-old, right? So what he needs help is how to be a daddy with a 1-year-old.
Yeah. How do I be a husband to a mama with a 1-year-old?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
And they got a dog in the house.
What kind of dog you got, Don? Yeah.
One of them little ones where his nose is mashed up, and that snort and but do what? Yeah, big old eyes, right? Like you kicked him in the tail.
Yeah.
But so there's this process we all got to go through. I mean, you and I got teenagers in the house, right? And we're dealing with that, having teenagers. We're dealing with all the stuff, and so you could just as easily tell Carson, these are the things you must do, and get him to obey them, right? Right.
But the whole thing is I want him to understand. And kids are good about this. They're going to ask why. So get ready, daddies. Get ready, Don.
Yeah.
They're going to ask why, and we want to
get a notebook, brother. I'm just telling you.
and I think I'm perfectly fine with my kid asking why as long as they're searching.
Yeah.
And I
don't ask why just to.
And I tell them that about their faith too. Like, it's okay for you to have a doubt as long as you're searching for a reason to answer that.
Yeah, like we did the wedding feast at Cana with Mary last week, and Liam, he's black and white. He's like, how do we know Jesus didn't make alcohol wine? Right. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to let you do Bible time next Friday night on that. So I want you to study it out, and I want you to figure it out. And so he did. He went through the whole process and studied it out and did a great job with it.
Yeah.
But, it's one of those things like I could have short-circuited the process.
Sure.
Right? And so sometimes you have to short-circuit the process.
Right.
Sometimes there's just things that you have to do to let them know you can't do this thing, right? In our shop class, like you're talking about, there's times that I have to tell them, you can't do that thing right there.
Yeah.
Like, you can't be a Tennessee fan and be highly intelligent at the same time. And so...
I know. You got the autofocus on Chris's face.
Yeah, well, that's good. Nobody wants that. That's a face... That's a logo for radio right there. I know it, exactly.
It's scary.
Yeah, it's scary, all right.
So it's like
a hemorrhoid.
It's like you won't like you don't fear us now. You will be. Listen to Yoda.
Yeah.
You will be.
Well, I saw him. You think about that. I saw a meme the other day, and
was it about how horrible the national championship was?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Those memes. Some things are so bad that you don't even make memes about it.
Oh my goodness.
And that was one of them.
I shut it off at halftime because I didn't want them to get the ratings of how good it was.
It's just terrible, right?
Yeah.
But to go back to our kids, then you think about this. We started with the dog, right? You helping us get Ginger, where she'll always listen to us. Because I told the boys, she's okay to stay here as long as she's not a burden.
Yeah.
If she becomes a problem and a burden, she gone.
Oh, she gonna be that.
She gone.
Because at some point you gonna go to camp,
Yeah, but my neighbors will feed her. But see, she's just an outside dog.
Yeah, right.
So it doesn't bother me. So they can just feed her. So that being said, you think about this. Our dogs are always going to be instinctive, and we need to figure out a way to make them do what they need to do.
That's right. And
our kids need to think. We need to think.
That's right.
We have these characters that help us to understand how we can think through these things. So we look at Mary when she makes these decisions, like you and I were talking the other night. Is it any reason? Is it any reason that we shouldn't think that when Jesus' first miracle that he does in John 2, Mary asked Jesus to fix the problem. Yeah. Really. She doesn't even say,
we ran out of wine.
Yeah, she didn't say turn this water to wine. She just says, we ain't got nothing else to drink. Mm-hmm. And so only thing Mary has to go on is what God has done in the past.
Yeah.
Substance and evidence. That's what faith is. Hebrews 11 and verse 1. So she can look backwards as a woman. You think about the stories that resonate with us. I mean, the David and Goliath, like David's mighty men. You remember the story of David's mighty men? They fought so long that they couldn't take their hand off their sword.
Yeah.
You ever done something so long your hand cramped up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can't even I rid my motorcycle for so long before that I couldn't get my hand off the handlebars, right? It was stuck on the handlebars. So you think about, we love those stories, right? They're fighting that long. Well, Mary's going to look backwards at those stories of she's a woman that's going to totally depend on God.
The way Hannah did.
The way the Shunammite woman did. The way all these people of old did. So what she has is substance and evidence. And so she knows that God's done a lot of stuff for taking care of his people with water pots, all these miracles God's done before through these prophets and these people. And so she just says, we just don't have any more wine. There's nothing else for us to drink.
She knew who to turn to. And Jesus says, well, my time's not come. And you look at her influence. And she's like, do what he says.
And walks away.
And she walks away.
Yeah, and just leaves it because she had this.
And I assume she walked away. Maybe she stood there looking at him and looking at them and going, do what he says.
Like
and she might have stood there mean like you do sometimes. And she might have been looking at her boy Jesus and says, well, son, when is going to be your time?
Right.
I don't know if she walked away or if she stood there. I know she didn't say anything else because you think about the small thing that she said and her influence with Jesus is that put into him.
Bob, we changed the course of human history at that moment because what you see is this white space scenario where Jesus says, it's not yet my time. He's saying that me and the Father and I, if my wife's listening, so she'll correct me grammatically, the Father and I, or the Father, or however.
Me and God.
The Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy, we had planned a moment.
Me had planned a moment.
Us three, me three, had planned this moment when I was going to kickstart the ministry. This point in time when I would say this was the point that we're going to do it. And Mary says, I need you to do this thing. And he's like, well, it's not my time. God could look at that little out-of-the-way wedding feast, and he can say, you know what? We can start from here too.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
And really, and how he started it, he started in the back room with his closest followers. Like the governor of the feast, then he called,
he's like, where did this come from?
Where did this come from? And so the what was known who did it was who was behind the scenes.
Yeah, and his disciples. And this is they believe.
And you think about like the power of your influence as a mother with whatever it may be, with the instincts of your children. Like I want my dog doesn't have to question anymore what means anymore. He knows that means good things. That means a treat. That means a pat on the head. That means, hey, daddy's calling me. We're going to throw ball. You know, he knows that's good things, or I'm, you know, whatever it might be. And so he knows those are good things. And so that's the culture that we've created with him. Well, when I was back to this marriage thing that I was doing with two people last night, is that every decision that you have to make in your life and in your marriage is this going to get me closer to God, or is this going to get my family closer to God? And so you just got to make these, you got to draw these lines and things that you're never going to cross again. Me and Courtney, before we ever got into ministry, and I don't know if you get to do this a lot, but I hope that every minister, whenever you do premarital counseling, that you get to include your wife at times, and hopefully a whole lot. But you know, I was able to look at them and said, you know, we don't have to decide anymore on whenever it's a cold, dreary Sunday afternoon, whenever it's 42 degrees outside or 33 and it's raining and or spitting snow. We don't have to decide anymore if we're going on a Sunday night.
Ain't nobody in South Mississippi making that decision, Bob.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you.
But or whenever it's a beautiful sunshiny day and there's a barbecue.
That might be different, South
and, you know,
Mississippi.
and I'm working on this project out, you know, and we don't have to decide anymore on a Sunday night if we're going to go or not. And Courtney said, we decided that about 15 years ago, you know, that every time, it didn't matter. We were going to be there when the doors are open. And we also committed that if I'm sick, she's still going to do her best to go. If she's sick, I'm still going to do my best to go, as long as we're not going to contaminate other people. The reason is because we understand that the benefits of being with God's people, encouraging God's people, and what we glean from being with God's people and hearing his messages and hearing his message. And so that's those treats, that's those whistles, that's the things that the Father leads us. He puts these things in our lives.
Well, he uses it, you know, in John, Jesus uses that analogy in John. You know, those are going to be taught are going to be drawn by God. Those are going to, my Father and I will come and make a home with him. All those things that Jesus is trying to draw this analogy, like there's this thing that's happening inside of you. And so he uses the analogy of the wine skins. You know, like Judaism, you guys, we had this temporary system in place to help you understand who you needed to be as Jews until the Messiah came. But you can't pour back into that anymore. You pour this new wine that we're getting ready to do into that, you're going to burst the bag.
Yeah.
You're going to, the bag's going to burst. And he says, he goes on to explain things like what you're missing is you're like the kids in the marketplace. The kids in the marketplace, they play these big people games. They play funeral, they play wedding, they act like adults, but they don't understand what it means to be an adult. He says, you can't be those people either. You got to be the people that understand, like when your kids are playing wedding, like you need to understand how important a wedding is in your mind. When they're playing funeral, you need to understand how important death is. When they're playing business, you need to understand how important, because Jesus is trying to get us to see that God's system that he wanted us to kind of, this process he wanted us to grow through was not about us just going through the motions and playing it while we have a stick to sword fight with. When I don't have a stick to sword fight with, I don't sword fight. It's not that way with us. It's just not something we play at. This is something that we become and we mature into, and this is the process. And so God gives us all these people, all these examples, all these things that we can help learn from each other.
Yeah.
That's why he gave us the church.
That's right.
So that we have the older women teaching the younger women, the older men teaching the younger men. All these processes that you're going to, the things that.
That's why he gave us the little children, because because those little children, you know, the older people resonate and they're like, man, if that little kid's doing that, I need to be doing that too. Of such are the kingdom.
Yeah, you know, Don come by me Sunday morning with throw up all over him. You know,
yeah,
little D.
Don, I don't know why you do that all the time.
Hey, you were preaching.
I preach so much that Don's little boy.
But he come by with throw up on him. Well,
yeah.
You think Don thought this is a horrible thing? I hate this kid. No. Now, if I'm sitting on a city bus and the meth head behind me throws up down the back of my shirt,
yeah.
I'm going to be real upset. You know what I mean? I'm going to be real upset. But my little boy throws up on me. Mm-hmm. Like, I brought Liam home from the doctor, when he had his pen put in his hand, he was like, "Daddy, I think I'm gonna be sick." I grabbed the little throw up pouch, and I'm literally holding it to his mouth. He's mashing his mouth as hard as he can against it. I can feel the bag filling up, getting heavier, and I'm trying to drive with one hand and thinking, "Wonder how much room's left in this bag over here. Wonder how much room." And none did I think I hated doing this. Mm-hmm. None did I think like I didn't want. Why? Because this is just a momentary thing, right? This is just a thing. He'll grow through these things, and it's a process for all of us. And so, what a blessing it is we can go through the process.
And the Father can lead us by the hand, and God is waiting there every day. He's wanting to hand feed you. He's wanting to hand feed us.
Man shall not live by bread alone.
The most blessed thing that we have, and you think that's Matthew 4:4. You eat 3 meals a day, and your fourth meal of the day should be Matthew 4:4. Man shall not live by bread alone. Live on the but every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And so if I'm wanting to change a culture, well, if you want your kids to not be racist one day, then they need to see you hugging people of another color.
Yeah, that's what Romans 2. He says, "You who commit adultery and say don't commit adultery." Mm-hmm. Do you say don't steal and then steal yourself? Do you go through do these things? Yeah, you can't. You can never legislate. Like Annie Jones, I made this statement a couple weeks ago and in class, and what I meant by it, I said I teach my boys God's grace, His love, His mercy, His all these things, but I tell them it's going to be up to you to learn how to love Him, because I can't teach you how to love Him. Mm-hmm. I can teach you about Him, and I can all these things, but I'll never be able to teach you how to love Him. And Annie Jones came up to me after. She said, "But you can sure show Him."
Yeah.
And that I thought about that, and I can tell my kids all the things I want them to do. I mean, I can go through and I can try the same system, a rule book system, right? But until I have their hearts, until the Lord really has their hearts, they're just going to be these pharisaical, self-righteous, whatever, however you want to say it. That's even if you're a good citizen, like you can follow God's rules and be a great citizen, but you're not the person that God wants you to be.
Yeah.
Because you're just looking at it as this system of rewards of rules. Just like your dog, when you whistle and your big giant dog comes running, he's just working on a system of rewards.
Exactly.
There's no faith in that. Yeah. He'll never grow beyond the fact that I get this little petty whatever it is from this, reward. He'll never reason it out like, I'm so happy that I get to serve Bob.
Yeah. Right, because perfect example. When I tell him sit and stay, all right, he knows that if he sits and stays and I throw his ball or whatever, he gets the reward to get to chase that ball. Well, right now he's got an ear infection. So when your
dog's got an ear infection?
Yeah, they got them pointed ears, and so he's got a bacterial infection. Trust me, Chris, I tried the Bob and Chris method of letting him go through this thing for a month, all right, it just got worse.
What did you do, cut one of his ears off?
No, He's become like one of the children at the Tips household, all right? And the thing is the vet bill, they did the stuff before I knew how much it was going to cost.
Oh, that's even worse.
It's even worse. Yeah. Anyways, he's got a $300 ear right now.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, anyways, we're going to see how much you love Ginger and see if Ginger's going to be a burden or not. Yeah.
Very subtle.
Daddy, where's Ginger?
She's gone.
She's gone.
Right.
She went to the happy farm. Right. No. So, but my dog, like, he keeps things away from the house that I want kept away.
Right. My dog will not.
He is.
My dog will bring things to the house. She's a half beagle and half terrier.
All the Amazon drivers will try to get out and pet your dog. All the Amazon drivers throw packages out the window in my house.
Yeah, you have the Ring camera. The guy flings a...
And look, all you have to do is put up beware of the dog, even though all he wants to do is play with them. Mm-hmm. They're like, does that dog bite? Only on command. That's all you have to say.
Right.
And anyways, if you say those things, anyways, He's like, when he's going, whoa, 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 he's going, come play with me. Why are you not playing with me?
Right. Get that ball.
Where's your tennis ball?
Right.
Throw me a tennis ball. But no, he's natural. He's a protector and guarder. But so yeah, he's worth the $300. But whenever I tell him to sit and stay right now, and he knows I've got the solution in my hand to clean his ear out, he is not happy. All right? He is not. And so there's some things that but he doesn't understand that I'm telling him, sit still and do this because it's going to be for your benefit.
And he'll never understand it.
He'll never understand it. And while me and you as a listener, when you do things God's way, you may not know it in that moment, but you will understand later on in your life that this really was a benefit for me.
Absolutely.
And so when we
just know this, God never told you to do something that wasn't good for you. You may not understand it right now.
And it may be difficult and hard.
Yeah, he didn't give us the easy things to do. And so if you do the things that God tells you to do, even if you don't understand them, you'll grow into those things if you want to.
Allow the shepherd we got to allow him to lead our lives. And man, it's we got to have the courage to do it the right way and be consistent about it. And you got something else you want to close with?
No.
Thanks for tuning in. Hit that like, subscribe button. Also, if this video is beneficial to you, or if you think it'll benefit somebody in your life,
send us Harley stuff.
Send it to send it to them. Y'all take care.
This is the Unscripted.